Hey everybody, before we get started on this, I decided to try my hand at a little bit of merchandise for the channel, so you can check it out in the description section below. Let's get into it. Hey YouTubers, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell over by the subscriber button to notify you every single time I upload. What's up guys? Today we're going to be talking about American Horror Story 1984 episode 8 entitled Rest in Pieces. And look guys, like always, before we break down what happened in this episode beat by beat, I do like to talk about if I liked it for everybody who hasn't watched it yet. Like, is it really worth watching? And I have to say that this week I think is the strongest week of this entire season thus far. I would even go as far as saying it's one of the most enjoyable episodes of American Horror Story that I've seen in quite a few years. It does kind of feel crazy to me that over the last couple of years, I think the general fan consensus of American Horror Story is it's kind of starting to go a little bit downhill. I mean, outside of your own individual preference for one of the last 4 or 5 seasons, I think most people would agree that the last couple years haven't been on par with the first 4 or even the first 3. But to me, 1984 has kind of been a little bit more of a revelation, and it is kind of weird to say that considering we don't have a whole lot of our mainstays that we've come to expect in every single season. But even still, even though I have criticized this in the past, just the boiled down basic approach of staying in one place and just kind of build upon these characters in this situation, to at least me, has made this a rather enjoyable season thus far. And really, this episode of all the other episodes that we've seen in this season really just takes the cake. It takes the entire concept and runs with it to its logical conclusion, to the point where almost every single scene, if not incredibly well acted with a great monologue here and there, it's just so immensely fun that I was just laughing my ass off watching this show in just complete joy. And look, after last week's episode, I can't be the only one who thought that we had seen the last of Bruce, played by Dylan McDermott, but I was really happy to see him show up in this episode, and for him, Ramirez, and Jingles to come together in a somewhat of a final showdown situation. To me, that was really fun, and I can't wait to see how they build upon that in the last episode. In fact, the way this episode goes makes me feel like, are we rushing towards the end? Because I want to stay with these characters in this situation a little bit longer. But even though I wish we did have a little bit more time, I appreciate the fact that they're not going to overstay their welcome. And frankly, as we get to the very end of this season with only 1 episode left, I have to admit, I've only really disliked 1 episode, that being episode 100, and that was probably more so because I got my hopes up for what it could possibly be and what it could mean for the overall series, instead of taking it at face value. I'm going to have to go back and watch this entire season again in order to really take all of this in, especially before I do my ranking later next week. But honestly, it has been an incredibly strong season, and this is by far the best episode. I had a whole lot of fun with it. So if that's all you really want to know before you go watch the episode yourself, and before you want to get spoiled on everything that happens, then I bid you a farewell. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content in the future, especially as we start talking about season 10. But with all that being said, let's get into what happened in this week's episode. The episode begins as it did in the promo, with Brooke and Donna sitting in a diner discussing the possibility of whatever future they can have right after they end up killing Margaret. But their conversation is quickly cut short as they're introduced to Stacy, a reporter who mentions that Brooke does in fact look like Brooke, even though Brooke is said to be dead after a lethal injection. And this causes Brooke to go on edge because she's sure that Stacy did recognize her. After that, we cut back out to just outside of Camp Redwood, where we realize that Jonas is out there walking around again, waiting to be picked up as a hitchhiker. And lo and behold, he's picked up by none other than Bruce, after having escaped the situation that he was put in last week, and now going to Camp Redwood in order to exact revenge upon Donna and Brooke. There's a fun little scene and interaction between where he got the car from and what he does to the woman who's the Mary Kay salesman who owned the car and he's stored in the trunk, especially once the woman wakes up and Jonas starts asking questions. Of course, then it kind of cuts away from Jonas, and he just kind of shows up this entire season not to do much besides give exposition about what it is to be a ghost in Camp Redwood, which honestly, unless there's some big revelation about his character, I would call pretty lazy on its face. And one thing I really want to mention just about this scene, and not really cover it throughout the episode, but it's particularly strong this episode, is its use of the soundtrack. I mean, almost every single music beat lands in an amazing way in this episode, and it really helped put me involved and put me in that 80s spirit. Anyway, the The episode then jumps to Courtney and Margaret discussing the death of Kajagoogoo, before Margaret really shows just how much of a monster she is when she orders Courtney to take away their corpses, clean them up, and make sure that nobody knows that they're dead so they can still hold the concert. Of course, Courtney really doesn't want to do that, but when he finally ends up doing it, he realizes that Kajagoogoo is still alive there because, having died in Camp Redwood, now they're ghosts. We then cut to Ramirez as he's stalking the setting up for Billy Idol before he goes into the woods and is assaulted by Benjamin. The two fall down a cliff, and then Bruce just rams into Benjamin before having a chance to introduce himself to Richard Ramirez and shows that he's a real big fan. I love this scene just because every time Dylan McDermott has the screen on American Horror Story, or really any time that Ryan Murphy's team allows Dylan McDermott to play a fun character, I think he always takes it at its core and just has as much fun as he possibly can. And I feel like that was really apparent in this scene as well. I mean, he was freaking out with the prospect of not only meeting the Night Stalker, but also having just hit Mr. Jingles with his car. And he's very quick on his toes to force a team up with Richard Ramirez as they both go after Mr. Jingles. The episode then cuts back to Donna and Brooke as they're once again face to face with Stacy, who explains to them that she knows everything. She knows that Brooke is still alive and that Donna helped her escape. She even has video evidence. So in order to make sure that she doesn't come out with all of this information immediately, Brooke tries to sell her another story. That in fact, if she takes them to Camp Redwood, she's going to prove to her that Margaret was the one who committed the murders in 1970 and 1984. And before I go any further, I just have to say this episode juggles a whole lot of things, because even after this, we have Jonas, as I said, giving exposition to Benjamin just about what it is to be a ghost at Camp Redwood, before we go into even more exposition heavy scene with Montana and Trevor talking about what it means to be a ghost in Camp Redwood. And a lot of that is just stuff that we heard in last week's episode. I'm not telling you it was bad. In fact, I like the relationship that they've been building up between Trevor and Montana throughout this entire season, and it's great to see them back again. I'm just saying it's a little bit much. Anyway, the scene between Trevor and Montana ends with Margaret watching them from afar and realizing that they are having somewhat of an affair as she's planning something a little bit more devious that we're going to learn later. We then cut back to Bruce and Ramirez as Ramirez talks about how he wants revenge on Benjamin for having put him in jail for all those years, before Xavier comes out of nowhere and just tells him that he knows where Benjamin is hiding, and he takes him to Benjamin's body. What ensues is another confrontation between the three main serial killers before Margaret shoots Benjamin in the head and then offers them a chance to team up with each other. We're then back to Stacy along with Brooke and Donna as they're walking around Camp Redwood and explaining everything that happened that fateful night over the course of the first 5 episodes. Of course, Stacy doesn't really believe this, so in order to stop Stacy from publishing her story and allowing both of them to go free, Brooke decides that she is going to kill Stacy, but Donna doesn't really approve. And like I said, guys, there's just a whole lot going on in this episode, so it's just kind of a weird breakdown. But then we're back with the counselors as they string up Benjamin because they're mad at him for not fully talking to his mother and potentially lifting the curse. It's in this conversation, even though a whole lot doesn't really come out of it, that Benjamin tells all the counselors that Montana is responsible for the Night Stalker being there back in 1984. I mean, this does come back later, but I'm wondering how that's going to play into the last episode. We're then back with Brooke and Stacy as they go to the cabin where Donna hid her in back in 1984, and Brooke tries to kill Stacy before being stopped by Donna and being told to run. Donna gives Brooke an entire speech about how they're only there to kill Margaret, and Donna isn't going to let Brooke go down that particular road of just killing everyone who remains a problem. They have a mission to do. But Stacy's life isn't that long-lived as she runs into Ramirez and Bruce and Margaret, and those two kill her, leaving her dead and potentially coming back in sometime in the next episode. And it's here where we finally get an explanation as to what Margaret wants to do. She wants to kill all the band members and essentially make Camp Redwood a memoriam to all 80s classic bands and rock music for people to come to for generations to come. And then we get what I think is the best part of the episode, this amazing back and forth between Trevor and Montana, as Trevor tells Montana that he's willing to kill himself and stay in Camp Redwood in order to be with her for the rest of eternity. But given everything that Benjamin just said about her and how she helped foster the Night Stalker, she believes herself to be incredibly evil. There's a lot of praise that we really need to give Billy Lord for this part of the show. I mean, I feel like she really brought her A game in order to give out that monologue about all the hurt and desperation that she's been feeling throughout the entire series. It really helped to humanize her character even just a little bit, even though she is still a huge monster and has only become more of a monster the longer she's stayed in Camp Redwood. And at the end of the episode, we have Benjamin being killed by Xavier and a couple of the Mr. Jingles copycats and being put out to sea before Bobby comes out of nowhere in the lake and drags him back into 1948. Of course, in classic Jason Voorhees standards from the original Friday the 13th. And we're left in that state now, having Benjamin with his mother and his brother, not really knowing what's going to happen, but with the threat that Ramirez is just simply going to leave the camp and go kill his son sometime in present day. So I know this is a little bit longer, but like I said, there's a lot of stuff that happened in this episode. The last two things I want to talk about here is they made a very big point at the beginning of the episode to say that this was taking place the day before Halloween. We know what spirits can do in the American Horror Story universe during the events of Halloween, and I'm wondering if that's going to play some kind of role that will allow Benjamin to save his son and also give some kind of idea of what's possible for Ramirez as we head towards the eventual American Horror Story Hotel cameo that we got in season 5. And I also think with the latest news that this episode was going to give some kind of hint as to what the theme for season 10 is going to be. I will be doing a video on this pretty soon, but I feel like the biggest hint we got here was Stacy talking about urban legends stuff. Maybe next season's going to be urban legends, but I want to hear what y'all have to think in the comment section below. Hope everyone is having a fantastic day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell over by the subscriber button to notify you every single time I upload. It's been real.